Welcome to this explainer. Today we're actually breaking down Chapter 4 from our source material on sustainable agriculture, and it's a really fascinating one. Usually when we think of farming, we picture these massive tractors and just endless acres of land, right? But what if I told you agriculture is incredibly adaptable? In this explainer, we're going to discover how sustainable agriculture can completely thrive outside of those massive traditional farms through 5 highly accessible vocations. So let's just dive right into this playbook for the modern micro farmer and see how you can produce some literally incredible yields in surprisingly small spaces.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to quickly move through 5 distinct methods: mushroom cultivation, aquaponics, pisciculture, backyard poultry, and non-timber forest produce. Now keep in mind, they all share one big theme. They require low space, but offer incredibly high yields if managed correctly.
Section 1. Mushroom cultivation, growing from spores. Let's step out of the sun and into a moist, dark, and cool environment. Just look at how mushrooms actually grow. It's wild! Unlike traditional crops, they grow completely without soil and without seeds. No way, right? They sprout directly from microscopic spores in carefully managed setups, just like the hanging polybags you're looking at here. Now, to succeed as a micro farmer with these, you absolutely have to nail the conditions in this dark environment. We're talking proper temperature, perfect humidity, good ventilation, and some strictly enforced hygiene.
Okay, so the secret engine behind this whole process is something called mycelium. While before you ever see a mushroom cap pop up, this cool root-like network spreads rapidly through your growth medium, which, by the way, we call a substrate. It's in there absorbing nutrients, acting kind of like the mold that develops on old bread. You introduce it to your substrate using something called spawn, which is basically your ultimate growth initiator. Setting this all up happens step by step. First off, you pick a site and prep your growth medium, usually straw or sawdust. Step 2 is absolutely crucial: sterilization. You literally must clean and remove any competing germs from the substrate. People often use a pressure cooker or a large drum for this. After that, you inoculate the spawn into the substrate and just let it incubate. While managing it, you've got to monitor moisture constantly. A great trick is the simple squeeze test to check if the substrate is damp but, not soggy. And finally, when those firm white caps are fully grown and you can clearly see the gills, boom, it is time to harvest.
Moving right along to Section 2, Aquaponics, fish and plant cultivation. Let's step out of the dark and into the world of water.
Just look at how incredibly efficient this setup is. You've got a fish tank down below holding the aquatic life, and then soilless grow beds situated right above it, filled with a medium like gravel or clay pellets. The water from the fish tank is continuously pumped up to feed the plants, and then it just naturally drains right back down. The really crucial point to grasp here is this beautiful natural symbiosis. In an aquaponics system, the fish produce waste, but instead of letting that waste just sit there and become toxic, it gets pumped up to the plants, acting as a super nutrient-rich organic food. In return, the plant roots step up as a natural biofilter. They strip out all those nutrients and send perfectly purified, clean water right back down to the fish. They're literally keeping each other alive and thriving. Now, there is a missing link here, and that brings us to our secret superpower for this setup: the nitrogen cycle. You see, the plants actually can't eat raw fish waste. They need beneficial bacteria to step in and convert the ammonia from the fish waste into usable nitrates. As a microfarmer, you actually have to kickstart this nitrogen cycle by introducing those beneficial bacteria way before you ever add your full load of fish into the tank. Up next is Section 3, pisciculture, controlled fish farming. Building on that whole aquatic theme, this third vocation really scales things up.
While fish obviously grow naturally in wild rivers and lakes, we can actually create these highly controlled, clean environments right in built tanks or prepared ponds in our own backyards. By controlling the environment, we get to manage the water entry, the drainage, and we can install aerators that pump vital oxygen directly into the water. This ensures the fish stay incredibly healthy the whole time. Maintaining this environment is a bit of a balancing act. On the quality side of things, we're looking for clear, odor-free water, a slightly acidic to neutral pH, and highly active fish. But equally important are the safety parameters. We have to avoid overcrowding to keep stress levels low, handle the fish super gently to prevent any injuries, and, this is a big one, maintain your electrical aerators very carefully to prevent shocks or accidents in that wet environment.
The steps to pulling off a successful harvest here are pretty fascinating. First, you prep the pond and test the water for pH, ammonia, and oxygen. But step 2 is the real secret sauce. Before you even think about introducing your fish spawn or juveniles, you actually add cow dung slurry or manure to the water. Sounds gross, but why? Because it stimulates the growth of tiny, natural plants and animals called plankton, which is literally the perfect starter food for the fish. Once they're in, you feed them rice bran or greens twice a day, keep an eye on their weight, and eventually, it's harvest time. All right, back to dry land for Section 4, Backyard Poultry, Farming in Small Spaces. Let's explore a classic, high-yield vocation you can manage in a simple courtyard or veranda.
A well-built coop really is the ultimate micro-farmer's blueprint. Simply put, a coop is just a small shelter where your chickens are kept safe. Notice here how secure it is from predators with strong fencing. Plus, it's properly ventilated and equipped with nesting boxes for clean egg laying. You can even use super simple, cheap materials, like a jute sack, to build the walls. It makes this incredibly accessible for anyone wanting to generate a side income or just secure their own food supply. Now, to keep your flock healthy, it all boils down to a few completely non-negotiable golden rules. First, keep it secure with strong fencing to lock out predators. Second, give your young chicks a brooder, basically a special, warm little house. Third, keep that bedding completely dry. Wet bedding on the floor is an absolute disaster waiting to happen and has to be removed to stop disease. Finally, clean the place regularly to prevent dangerous bacteria like E. coli, and always store your feed in closed containers so it doesn't spoil. Here's a great pro tip for when you're managing your coop day to day. A super simple trick to check their health is monitoring what's called the feeding response. When you toss in their grain, mash, or kitchen greens, just stop and watch how actively and eagerly the chicks eat. A really strong, enthusiastic feeding response, that is your #1 primary indicator that your flock is doing great.
Section 5, Non-Timber Produce, Sustainable Gathering. Our final vocation takes us out into the wild, but with one very firm rule: look and gather, but do not chop. This category covers a surprisingly huge variety of sustainable products that can support a livelihood without ever needing to cut down a single tree. We're talking about gathering honey, medicinal leaves, fruits, and bamboo. But what's genuinely fascinating on this list is lac. Think about this. You can make varnishes and dyes just from a natural resin left behind by tiny insects that live on the branches of certain trees. How cool is that?
The entire core philosophy here is sustainability and minimal disturbance. First, you pick an accessible forest area and actively protect the host plants you find there. For instance, you might use mulching, which is just covering the soil with dry leaves to protect it and help the plant thrive. You keep an eye on the plant's health, and when it's finally ready, you use the right tools like a hand pruner or sickle to safely harvest only what you need. After that, you just use sieves to shake out the dirt, dry your produce, and store it safely in jars.
Section 6, Conclusion, Adaptable Agriculture. And just like that, we're at the end of our journey breaking down Chapter 4.
We've really seen today that agriculture is incredibly adaptable. It absolutely does not require massive tracts of land, heavy machinery, or some huge initial investment to be highly successful and sustainable. Whether it's setting up a cool room for oyster mushrooms, balancing an aquaponics tank, raising fish, building a backyard poultry coop, or just sustainably gathering forest treasures, the power to produce food is highly accessible. You don't need acres of land to make an impact, you just need a bit of ingenuity. So, look at your own backyard, your balcony, or even just your spare room. Which of these micro farms are you going to start building today? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy farming.